What's up, everybody? A very happy Monday here on the Refuse to Lose podcast. Brady Farkas with you, your Mariners on Roundtable Sports publisher. Remember, myself and Taryn Kovacs do what we hope is a great job bringing you all the Mariners content that you could want on the written side of things. We do that every single day at marinersroundtable.com. We appreciate those of you who have supported us already and joined our free community, which is a way to keep the conversation going. Since we've both been banned from Reddit, it's a way to keep us involved in the conversations that you are having about the Mariners as well. The community section is free, of course. You can join it right on our homepage at marinersroundtable.com. This podcast comes out 3 times a week, usually Monday night or Tuesday, Thursday with Buster Olney, our ESPN MLB insider, and then on Friday as well. We've got a full show lined up today. Maury Brown from Forbes is going to be with us talking about the business of baseball, a conversation we started getting into last week, but we needed some extra help to kind of get across the finish line. The upcoming labor issues, salary caps, Mariners finances, etc. All of that with Maury Brown coming up in about 20 minutes or so. Hey, a quick public service announcement, a way that you can help me. I have had some issues the last couple of video streams. One, we had an audio issue where the sound was correct on the podcast version, but it wasn't correct on the video version. Second video we had where I was freezing for the entirety of the video. So we've, I believe, figured out the technical issues we were having the last couple of days. We've gone to the wired internet connection. So if you are watching live on YouTube or on X and you sense any issues in terms of how I sound or in terms of how the podcast looks, let me know in the comments section, because that's something I want to try to fix in real time. Those of you who are watching live, thank you. You can get in with your comments live. And those of you who are listening subsequently on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, I appreciate you as well. Again, Maury Brown from Forbes talking business of baseball. He will come up in about 20 minutes. And without further ado, let go.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And here we go.
I have spent the last 2 days digging out from 20 inches of snow here in upstate New York. 5 separate shoveling trips in the last 36 hours or so. So I am very ready for spring training. Mariners report to spring training in just about 2 weeks. So I am very ready for my trip to Peoria. Those of you who are going to Peoria, I'm sure are ready about now as well. It's hard to believe we are getting closer and closer to seeing the Mariners on the field again in 2026. So let's not bury the lead. The Seahawks are going back to the Super Bowl. 4th time in franchise history. They're 1-2 in the previous 3 trips. They're looking to even it up when they take on the New England Patriots this time around. Seahawks win the NFC title game, beating the Rams 31-27 at Lumen Field last night. As I have had over the last 3 weeks or so, I have some Mariners-related thoughts to the Seahawks. First and foremost, number one, the euphoria that a lot of us had last night about the Seahawks. Just think, once again, I was reminded of just how good that will feel if and when the Seattle Mariners accomplish it. If you are a Seahawks fan, whatever you felt last night, and I felt it too, the joy, the happiness, the tears, the smiles, whatever you felt, think of how good it will feel if and when the Mariners accomplishment. That emotion that we all had yesterday, or a lot of us had yesterday, is what we are chasing over the next 8 months with the Seattle Mariners. That feeling is what we are chasing. Think of how good that will feel if it's the Mariners. And secondly, it is time for Seattle sports fans to get greedy. And I will explain that in a moment, but let me go back to my first point. I'm watching last night, and you know this, right? I'm a diehard Seahawks fan. That said, I am more of a baseball fan. So I love the Seahawks. I always have. But the Mariners do mean more to me. But I'm watching the Seahawks last night, and I'm seeing the defense force a 3-and-out on the first possession. I'm seeing Kenneth Walker score on the first possession to take a 7-0 lead. Sam Darnold lead his team down the field continuously. Incredible plays from Jackson Smith and Jigba. Cooper Kupp. The defense, it bent and it broke, which it rarely does, the offense picks them up. The special teams recovers a botched punt. The stars made plays. The lesser known guys made plays. Derek Young on the punt, Jake Bobo with the touchdown. You saw it all come together for the Seahawks last night. It wasn't perfect. There were plenty of things that I don't think the Seahawks did all that well yesterday, but it came together for that team in the NFC title game, and it was amazing. What we saw last night and following up what we saw from the Mariners in 2025, that makes me proud to be a Seattle sports fan. It makes me proud to have grown up a Seattle sports fan. But I am now thinking, right, as I transition from a football weekend to back to thinking about baseball, imagine how it will feel if that is the Seattle Mariners in 2026. Because, again, that is what we're all chasing. Imagine a Game 5 or a Game 6 or a Game 7 of the ALCS at T-Mobile Park. Imagine Brian Wu on the mound. Imagine him striking out the side in the first. Imagine the roar of the crowd when that happens. Imagine Cal or Julio homering in the bottom half of the first inning. Imagine Josh Naylor with a hustle double and the eruption that there would be when he catches the pitcher sleeping and steals third. Imagine Brian Wu getting a little bit of trouble and then the bullpen coming in and Edward Bizzardo striking out 2 hitters with runners at second and third and 1 out in a 1-run game. Imagine what that will be like, because that is what we are hoping for, and that is what we are clamoring for, and that is what is potentially in front of us in 2026. The Mariners are on the verge of that feeling that we all had last night being a reality. They are on the verge of everything coming together in a way that it did for the Seattle Seahawks, right? As good as the Blue Jays are, as good as the Red Sox are, as good as the Yankees can be, as pesky as the Astros and Rangers might be, the possibility exists for the Mariners to have those emotions that we saw yesterday and for them to raise a trophy and to clinch a berth in a championship series. It is at their fingertips, and it is for that reason that we want this offseason to make one more move, right? Brendan Donovan, Nico Horner, a reliever, and something we're not thinking of, whatever it is. Because we all want what we had last night, that is why we want one additional move from the Mariners. Because right now, and I've told you this, and I've been honest and upfront about it, I believe the Mariners have had a good offseason. And if it ended today, I would still be happy with what they've done. But that last night, that feeling last night, reminds me that I want it to go from good to great. That I want to go from Game 7 on the road to Game 7 at home. We are chasing that feeling, and we are chasing it for this team. That emotion last night, as good as it was for the Seahawks, I have seen that before. I have lived that 3 other times, and it doesn't make last night less special. But I've never seen it for the Mariners, and you haven't either. It is something we have waited our entire lives for. I want this so bad for me, but I want this so bad for all of us. And last night was a reminder of just how amazing it will be if and when it happens for the Seattle Mariners. And again, that is what is in front of us in 2026. Seahawks head coach Mike Macdonald talks about chasing edges all the time. The Mariners need to be chasing those edges as well. This offseason has been good, but it can be great. This offseason has been satisfactory, but it can take you to a level of completeness that you're not out right, that you just don't have right now, right? That you just don't have right now. Seahawks have done their part. Mariners, do your part in 2026 as well. All right. Let's continue on with the Seahawks and Mariners metaphors here for a minute, or at least let me talk about kind of the parallels again. It is time for all of us to get greedy. And I will admit it. Being greedy is hard for me as a fan. I am not a greedy fan. And you know what? All of that stems from the fact that being a Seattle sports fan historically has not allowed us to be greedy. Being a Seattle sports fan historically has taken from us rather than allowing us to demand more. Okay? It hasn't allowed any of us to be a greedy fan. Now, I don't think I'm greedy by nature, but on the sports front, I know that I'm not, right? So let's play this out. The Seahawks won the Super Bowl for the first time in 2013. I was 22 or so. And up until that point, I had very little sports success, right? The 01 Mariners, the 2000 Mariners, the 95 Mariners, 97. Then the Seahawks team that got to the Super Bowl in 05 and lost to Pittsburgh, right? But there's like, the heartbreaking loss in Green Bay in the playoffs. Like, I think there was a loss to Chicago in there. But, like, very little sports success. Seahawks win the Super Bowl in 2013. And at that point, I felt so grateful to have been given any sliver of sports happiness that I decided then that, like, okay, I'm good now. Like, I'm pretty much good, at least on the Seahawks front. As a result, I didn't even get mad when the Seahawks lost to the Patriots in 2014. I wasn't mad at the play call. I wasn't mad at Darrell Bevel. I wasn't mad at Russell Wilson, at Pete Carroll. I wasn't complaining about Malcolm Butler. None of it. I wasn't mad at any of it because I just immediately defaulted to the Seahawks won last year. I'm good. Because for the 21 years prior, I had gotten absolutely nothing. I felt like asking for more than one Super Bowl was greedy. And to be honest, for me, I've still been living on that Super Bowl's reputation as a fan. I haven't criticized the Seahawks much at all over the last decade. Okay? I truly felt like since I've seen one, I don't need another. I want another. I want 10 other Super Bowls. But I haven't really complained at all about the Seahawks over the last decade plus because they won in 2013, right? Again, I was so grateful to just have one because most of our fandom had been so poor up to that point that I was just like, look, I'm good now. And anything else is just gravy. So I'm not a greedy fan. And I'll be honest, what all this leads me to is this. If the Seahawks win the Super Bowl again, and if they then have 2 championships, and I will have seen 2 championships for my teams, my inherent mindset is to not complain about the Mariners in 2026. My default position, if the Seahawks win the Super Bowl, would be life is pretty good. I don't have the right to complain. That would be my default position. Okay? And because I'll be honest, I hate people who have sports success complain about not having additional sports success, right? Like I told you, I've done radio in New England I did radio in New England for 8 years. Red Sox win the World Series one year, and immediately the fans are bitching about the Patriots not winning the Super Bowl. I'm like, really? You just won the World Series. I would be thrilled to be in your shoes. Or, hey, the Patriots and Red Sox both win titles, but the Celtics and Bruins didn't, and the people are complaining. And I'm like, how entitled and spoiled are you? I want so bad to even see one title that you're complaining about not getting 2 in the span of 6 months. You're complaining about not getting 4 in a calendar year. I have always hated that, and I have always resented fans like that. But you know what? It is time for me to change my attitude. If you feel like I do, if you've felt like I do, it is time for you to change your attitude as well. It is time for us as fans to expect more. It is time for us as fans to realize that we deserve more. It is time to get greedy. It is time for a bigger seat at the table. It's time to act like they act in New York and Boston and Philadelphia. It is time to demand more from our more from our teams. It is time to demand more success. And again, that is hard for me because when the drought was going on, I used to say all the time, I would give my left arm for the Mariners to even make the playoffs. I would have given my left arm for the Seahawks to win one Super Bowl. Typically, now that has happened, I have been very, very easy on the Seahawks. Since the Mariners got to the ALCS, there is an element of, oh, I'm just happy to be there because I remember what it was like to not be there. But if the Seahawks win the Super Bowl, I will have to fight the urge to just say, hey, life's pretty good. That's all I need. If the Seahawks win the Super Bowl, that will be great, but it won't absolve the Mariners from criticism. It won't absolve me from wanting more, and it shouldn't absolve you from wanting more. It is time for us as Seattle sports fans to ask for more, to expect more, and to recognize that we have a chance to experience sports success and sports fandom in a way that we never have before. It is time, and it is difficult. I put out on social media, kind of jokingly, I said, hey, if the Seahawks win the Super Bowl, have I lost my right to complain about the Mariners in 2026? And most of you said no. Most of you said, hold their feet to the fire. And that's what I'm going to do, right? Because this Mariners team is good enough to win the West again. This Mariners team is good enough to have expectations. This Mariners team is good enough to get to the playoffs. And you know what? If things break their way, they're good enough to get to the World Series, and they can make some moves along the way that make that a bigger reality. It's time for me and for anybody else to not just take what we are given. Demand more. Other markets have been doing it forever, and I have found it irritating. It's time for us to operate the same way. All right, one last thing, and I know it's apples and oranges because I know it's a different sport and I know it's a different mindset, but I do just want to bring this up one last time, and it will probably be the last time I ever bring it up. At least I hope that it is. And Maury Brown from Forbes is coming on in just a few minutes here. If you remember back in August of 2024, when this podcast was only in its infancy, a lot of you who are listening now probably weren't listening to me in August of 2024. But I said in August of 2024, I was ready to move on from Scott Service. I raised the question in April of 2024 if it was time to move or if we were getting to the point where it was time to think about moving on from Scott Service. I don't take a whole lot of joy in being right on that. I don't take a whole lot of joy in calling for another man's job. It is not something that I like to do. But I did say that Scott Service, I was ready to move on from in August of 2024. And what we saw from the Seahawks is why you do that, right? Now, maybe history will look at Pete Carroll and say that, hey, what happened with Vegas this year, he had lost his fastball. But when he was still with the Seahawks, I think it was clear that he was still a fine coach, right? The Seahawks were still good-ish. They were still relevant. They had moved. They had, shown that they could play okay with Geno Smith, like that they could win with Geno Smith. They could play okay with Geno Smith at least. Like, I think they got to the playoffs with Geno, if I'm remembering correctly, with Pete Carroll. And is that right? Got to the playoffs with Geno? I think so. Yeah. So it was the Seahawks could have stayed the course with Pete Carroll, but they made the move to let him go and to move on and go get Mike Macdonald, who was arguably one of the brightest young coaches, certainly one of the brightest young coaches in football and arguably one of the best head coaches in football, right? So the Seahawks had fine, they had acceptable, and they made a difficult decision to go get somebody else. And I thought it was the right move for the Seahawks also. What you've seen from the Seahawks now is why you make a move like that. And it's why I think, and it kind of recrystallized to me last night, the Mariners made the right move moving on from Scott Service. They had a fine manager. They had a manager who was generally well-liked, and if they had kept Scott Service, I think they would have continued to be relevant. They probably would have continued to be good despite the collapse that came in 2024 of losing a 10-game lead in the division. But you sometimes have to make an uncomfortable decision to get where you ultimately want to go. And Dan Wilson proved to be a very good choice at the end of 2024 and into 2025, right? Could we have found a sexier candidate potentially, one who was more well-known? Yeah, sure, right? But all fine. But Dan Wilson proved to be a good choice. The Mariners made a tough decision, moved on from a guy who was well-liked, who had had success. They made a difficult decision, and they made the right decision. And this is why you make a move like that, for the hope that it becomes what the Seahawks have, right? The Seahawks take a swing on McDonald, and you're hoping for a culture builder and a defensive guy and a younger guy with a different energy and a different voice. That's what you're hoping for if you're the Mariners when you moved on from Scott. And so far, through a year and change, it has proven to be a good decision. So, again, I didn't take joy in calling for Scott's job in 2024, but when people say, "Oh, Brady, like they were good with Scott," I'm like, yes, they were good with Scott. But again, I want to be great. The Seahawks were okay with Pete Carroll. They were fine with Pete Carroll. I wanted to be great. The Seahawks made the move. It paid off, and it might really pay off in 2 weeks. The Mariners made the move. It paid off in 2025, and the hope is that it will really pay off about 8.5 months from now. And we will see. But Mike McDonald, Dan Wilson, both coming in for respected coaches and managers, and both elevating fairly quickly. One's got a chance to win a championship ASAP. One had a chance to win a championship in 2025, and maybe we'll get one in 2026. All right. I want to go out to the phone line, and I want to bring on Maury Brown. So if you remember, I think it was last week, we started talking about the business of baseball, right? And we're talking about the labor situation and the impending, what we all assume is going to be a lockout next offseason. And if you want to get, if you are not up on the business of baseball, no big deal. The collective bargaining agreement is what keeps the players and the owners in lockstep. The collective bargaining agreement between players and owners runs out after the 2026 season. So on December 1st of 2026, there is no collective bargaining agreement in place. At that point, as the two sides negotiate, the owners will lock out the players, which will basically create a freeze. There will be no transactions. There will be nothing that happens. Players will work it on their own. The two sides will lawyers will negotiate, and we'll see how quickly we can get it hammered out. But the doomsdayists think that we could miss the entire season over these labor negotiations in 2027. The less doomsdayish people think we'll miss maybe none or some of the season in 2027. The owners will probably ask for a salary cap. The players will clearly balk at that, and that will be the jumping off point for this labor fight. What does it all mean for baseball? What does it all mean for the Mariners? We started to talk about that last week. The guy who I think is the best in the business at baseball business is Maury Brown. He's a senior contributor at Forbes. I have never spoken to him before. He is a Mariners guy. I know he is. Again, the last time we had a lockout before 22, I was following Maury Brown religiously. He is the guy that I wanted to get. We bring him on today. Maury Brown, senior contributor over at Forbes. Maury, thank you for being with me, my friend. Appreciate the chance to speak with you here on this Monday night. How are you?
Hey, I'm great, man. Thanks for having me.
Well, I appreciate you being with me. You've covered the business of baseball for 20 years. Kind of overarchingly, what is your assumption on how contentious these arguments will be next offseason?
Well, I mean, if we start at the current labor deal, right, and negotiations that were and round out, right, I think you could say fairly confidently that we're going to have a lockout for sure. It will, of course, occur in the off season. And if you look at the last one, we got a full season in. It required having some double headers to get the full 162 in, and we've shortened up spring training. I would expect this to be more significant. And the reason for that is the depression in television money at the regional sports network level. And then I think that the biggest one is that franchise values have not kept pace with other leagues that do have cap systems. And that may be the biggest driver that a lot of people are not talking about. I think that that's a significant part of it.
Let's talk about the cap. Let's hit it from a few angles. But the assumption from fans is that having a salary cap would help more teams get in the running for players like we have in the NFL. Is that a fair assumption, or is there something big we're missing?
Yeah, I don't know if that's quite right. And the reason that I mention this is that let's just say, for whatever number you want to use, that let's say you raise the floor for the likes of the Pirates or the Rays or the Reds. Let's say you brought it up to, I don't know, 105 million, right? 110 million. I wouldn't expect those clubs to go much beyond that. So let's just say you lowered and created a cap system that was at, I don't know, 250 million or something, right? It would still be high, and the ability to do some big cut would be almost impossible. The ability for those teams that are at the bottom to still compete for those free agents would be very limited. They might be able to extend some players that they develop. So maybe that there's that. I think that a cap system, beyond largely helping the owners, right, and making them more profitable, you might see clubs like the Mariners, right, some that are in the upper middle class, maybe have a go at it maybe a little bit easier. But are you going to get the parity that I think a lot of fans think that you get in the NFL? I mean, I think it's good to remember that Major League Baseball has the best parity in the postseason in terms of the number of postseason teams that go there, irrespective of the fact that we have back-to-back championships with the Dodgers, right, that came down to a Game 7. It almost didn't go back-to-back, right? It was very close. The difference between baseball and basketball and football is, in basketball and football, under a clock system, you can have players that can control game outcome the entire game. You can have your quarterback on your offense the entire time. If you have a good receiver core, you can do something. If you have a good point guard or forward, you can control game outcome through the entirety of an NBA game. You cannot do that in baseball. It really requires having a balanced roster and spreading out your resources across that. So listen, I just don't think that the idea that a cap system is suddenly going to make for some, socialist parity, I think is grossly overstated.
To that point, with the Mariners specifically, I guess we see this all the time in the NFL, right? Team pays their quarterback, and all of a sudden their quarterback's making 38% of the cap, and now all of a sudden you've got a hole at offensive line, you've got a hole on defense, etc. If so, the Mariners do a good thing, right? Sign Julio Rodriguez and develop Cal Raleigh, and then all of a sudden they have to pay them. Well, now all of a sudden those two players make 50% of the money, and the rest of the roster is deficient. Is that a fair worry?
No,
Okay.
I would expect it. I mean, listen, they're under club control initially. I mean, when you develop, right, the advantage that the Mariners have had is that they've righted a ship that was wrong for a long time, right? I mean, Jerry DiPoto came in and really got the farm system sorted out. And really, I mean, the Mariners probably have the best, prospect pool right now that you could probably bargain for. So look, I mean, when those guys hit, that's what you should be doing. You get them under club control. They come out of salary arbitration. You try and sign them before they hit free agency and give them extensions and make that happen. I think the concern I have for the Mariners have been they have more resources now than they have. Granted, they shut down Root Sports Northwest, right? So they don't own that anymore. Of course, they were, I would assume, been losing money since the Blazers have been terrible. They really weren't getting much ad money outside of, the baseball season. This would have been the year that they should have had the resources to do stuff. Now, all that said, they basically have, re-signed your first base, lost second, and Polanco, and there's still a hole at third. Now maybe Capoto and the rest of the front office do something with trades, which is kind of part and parcel, right? So maybe Donovan comes over. Maybe that happens. But I'll be interested to see if it really is of the design and of the idea that they're basically holding pat with what they have. And there's some concern given how basically the pitching roster kind of regressed in some cases. I know that we had an injury, right, with Wu at the end of the season, which really did not bode well for them in the postseason and hurt them. But again, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I don't know if they are able to continue to move forward that they have. But look, there's still some time. There really is. It's just been kind of interesting to watch them do it. And I don't know, again, in the free agency space, whether this really changes much. The one thing I will say is that the television landscape has created uncertainty where money was locked in, right? It was cash certainty. You knew what your payments were going to be coming in, and whether you bode well in the standings or not, that money is still locked in. Now the Mariners will be leaning into how well they do from an advertiser's perspective and the streaming perspective based upon performance in the standings. So that money is expected by most clubs to go down, and there's no backstop by the league that they did in the first year when clubs went over under Major League Baseball's production control. They did what they call backstopping. They said, all right, whatever revenues you were supposed to make, we'll make up the difference. So, well, they're not doing that anymore. So it's quite possible that ownership went, you know what, there's just so much uncertainty right now. We're not going to take a gamble, especially given the fact that after this year, like we're talking about, we're almost certainly going to go into a lockout.
Talk to me a little bit about how the TV stuff works, because the Mariners, as you said, shut down Root Sports Northwest. They're going to go under Major League Baseball's control. How are the finances work? Mariners, I imagine, save some overhead by shutting down Root Sports Northwest, but what else do they lose in that can cause the profit to go down?
Yeah, the thing that I mentioned mostly is, right, that cost certainty. What you want if you're running a business, right, is you want to know what your basically your revenues coming in are going to be. And the more that those are locked in, the better. So look, they should expect that their season ticket renewals are going to go up. Their requests for renewal are going to go up. They had the postseason money, so they have a little bit in the bank there, right? But the TV money is largely going to be dependent upon the carriage deals, which they've been able to do. Major League Baseball has been very good about this. And then streaming, right? When they're talking about this deal where they say, you know what, you've got no more blackouts. What that has meant in the past is that, and this especially for the Mariners, right? The broadcast territory is huge, right? It was the main driver that they got such a huge broadcast territory when they were making what was then Safeco Field, right?
Yeah.
That was the deal that they said that they had to have. And there's some places where, whether it's DirecTV or Charter or Xfinity or whatever your carrier is, doesn't reach certain parts of that broadcast territory. Well, now with streaming, you're 100% covered. And so, again, it'll really be dependent upon how exciting the team is, because if I go in and I say, hey, it's not working for me, I can say I'm not going to renew. And that, again, speaks to the fact that you just have an unknown quantity in what your television media rights deal is going to look like in this very first year. They just don't know.
I'm curious about the players' perspective on things, because obviously the top earners in the sport, the top earning players, they don't want a salary cap. They want to be able to make $500 or $700 million. The rank and file players, do you think they care as much if there's a cap in place? Because I can't imagine that those guys who are making league minimum want to miss games. So are we going to get in a battle with the players union where some guys are willing to hold out because they can, and some guys don't want to hold out because they can't afford to?
Well, you can look at it this way. Owners, there are 30 of them. There's about 5,000, right? We'll just throw that number out there, number of players. And so the ability to hold the center is much more difficult. But look, no one at the MLBPA has been under the impression that we're not going to go into a lockout. They constantly tell them to save, and they've been saving a lot of their business arm money that they through licensing and whatnot, video games, whatever it is, merchandise, whatever that is. They've been holding that money in escrow as a war chest. And so they've been gearing up for this, right? So, of course, nobody wants to lose regular season games. And for the rank and file, it affects them immediately once games are played, right? That's when it starts to really hit. And that's why there's an advantage for the owners in a lockout situation. First of all, it takes all the power away from the players. You'll never see a strike again, right? The owners will never allow that. But it, of course, for many of the owners, and believe it or not, this really affects more of the Yankees and the Dodgers, where they have large seating capacities and larger attendance. But for the most part, the A's, the Rays, the Pirates, it's easier for them to sit out games early, irrespective of opening day. Once you get past that, I mean, largely April and May are largely lowly attended games, right? It's cold, it's wet, kids are still in school. So there's all of that. So that puts more power with the players now. So the players basically have to ride it out. If this gets really contentious, I would say they have to ride it out till May. And then after that, all the pressure, I think, shifts over to the owners. And in the middle of all this is the idea that this last year, there's been an incredible amount of momentum. We've had back-to-back attendance increases, which is something that we haven't seen in a while. But now, while we didn't have record television, given the television landscape, the ratings and viewership numbers were very, very rosy. It was a very good year. So there's all this momentum. You're going to have this momentum. And remember, in 3 years, the league goes into their national broadcast deals. You're going to throw all that away. You're going to go ahead and say, you know what? It's worth it to go ahead and go to the mat and maybe lose a half a season or a full season where you're going to do significant damage. And the key difference to this between 1994-95 and the strike and now is that there are a load of options for people. I can jump over to Netflix. I can go to YouTube. I can go to social media. None of that stuff was around during the 94-95 strike. So listen, it's very fragile. I mean, what you're flirting with here and what you're doing right now is, of course, a lot of saber rattling. And you may lose some regular season games. I'm under no preconceived notion that that's an impossibility. But I just think it would be dangerous for them to go with something lengthy. I think it would do real harm.
Let me get you out of here on this. I saw you tweeting about this the other day. It's a question that I've had. What about the deferred money question? Because maybe it's too simplistic that I'm not getting something. It feels like getting rid of deferred money would be the way to combat the Dodgers and the Mets without impacting overall player salaries. Am I right in that, or am I wrong?
Well, maybe, and then we just saw that Ramirez had to deal with deferred comp. So, I mean, it's not something that's wholly unique to those clubs. Now, the Mets and the Dodgers have the ability to do more with it, and we're focusing on the Dodgers largely because they've come into two things. One, maybe the greatest player we're going to see in this generation, in Shohei Ohtani, did a significant amount of deferred compensation, right? I mean, he's basically taking $2 million in cash as his salary in a given year, and the rest of it is deferred. Him being signed along with Yamamoto opened up all these avenues for sponsorship deals and the Japanese television deal for the Dodgers, and that is why they have such an advantage right now. But the Mets have been doing it for a while. I mean, obviously, Bobby Bonilla is an annual rite of passage. So I don't know. I mean, I know this much: the Players Association, I think, are dead set against it. At least leadership is. So you really wouldn't expect that to be there. But I would expect that there's going to be something significant, whether it's salary arbitration changes, what the owners wanted last time, or something else. Whether it's called a salary cap and a salary floor, it could be something else. But I would expect, again, that nothing is off the table at this point. I think that the owners are going to come at it, and I think that the players are really girded for battling and fighting it off. They don't seem to be ready to go ahead and fold their cards right now, especially, like I said, with this local television money dipping. The argument that it was like to the middle class and rank and file guys, which was, hey, look at all this money you've left off the table if you had taken this deal, which is a percentage of baseball revenues. Well, that argument would have worked great 5, 6, 10 years ago. Now that money is in decline. So again, it doesn't look as great. Remember, what goes up doesn't always, can come down, and that would affect any kind of cap system where it's tied to the top and the bottom with a percentage of baseball-related revenues.
Maury Brown, senior contributor at Forbes, Business of Baseball. We'll put his Twitter handle in our show notes on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. He is the best, man. First time talking. Maury, appreciate it. Maybe I'll see you out at T-Mobile Park sometime here in 2026. Thank you.
Oh, you can guarantee you'll see me out there. You take care. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. There he goes, Maury Brown, senior contributor at Forbes. I mean, look, that is the best guy that I know to go and talk to about the business of baseball. I will admit it. Some of it is still over my head after talking with Maury, but kind of as I'm talking to him and as I'm listening, there's a handful of things that do become pretty clear to me. Looking at the 2027 season, his point about missed games potentially, it makes sense, right? So let's remember this. Players do not get paid if games are not being played. Players only get paid in the season. Players do not get paid at spring training. Players do not get paid salary in the playoffs. Players are only paid between April and the end of the regular season. So if there are no games, players are not being paid. So if you miss games early in the season, the players are heavily impacted, right? The players are now missing checks that they are counting on. Some players can obviously hold out. Other players cannot because they're making the league minimum. Maury Brown says the league has been preparing for this. The players have been preparing for this. They're creating what he calls the war chest of funds that they can then have in reserve if they are missing games. So the players are impacted right away, but they are doing what they can to prepare for it. Maury says also correctly, the owners are okay, kind of, if you're missing games early in the season, because the owners, there's not as many fans at early season games, right? Weather is bad. Kids are in school. The owners are like, look, we got to miss games. We'll miss in April and in May because we're not drawing huge numbers from those contests anyways. Maury then says, Taryn Kovach comes in and tells me that we froze up on the video again real quick, but it seems okay on my end. So we'll see if it continues. But let me know if you see any issues here, again, on the video front. I do appreciate Taryn for letting me know that. But again, let me know if anything happens. Anyways, the owners, they kind of need everybody playing again by June because that's when they're expecting the big crowds. So I thought that was interesting. Secondarily, let's see. Another message coming in. I want to make sure that the video is working here before I move on. He goes, it's fine now. All right, that's good. So the other big thing, and the thing that I need to understand better moving forward, is the impact of the television money, right? The Mariners shutter Root Sports Northwest. And in doing so, right, they're saving on worker salaries. They're saving on a brick and mortar building. They're saving on overhead. But according to Maury, what they are losing is certainty financially, right? Like when you have your own TV network, you know where everything stands. Now that they're under Major League Baseball control, they no longer know where everything stands. And what exactly that means, I don't know, right? I imagine the Mariners will sell advertising, but how does the advertising work? What are the rates for streaming versus actual television? Are they getting more advertisers? Are they getting less advertisers? That is still a little bit, over my skis here on things. But evidently, the general consensus is that if you go to Major League Baseball, you are going to make less money. So if so having your own TV deal is better financially than being under Major League Baseball. Eventually, Rob Manfred seems to want everybody playing by the same system, but that is not the case right now. So if the Mariners are making less money than they used to television-wise, that could point to a difficult dynamic as to why maybe they're not spending as much this offseason, or maybe why they're trying to protect themselves in the future. So, again, a little bit over my head, but Maury Brown Forbes is the best that I can do on the money front, on the financial front, as we head into the 2026 season, and then coming out of 2026 into labor uncertainty. A couple quick things here to wrap up on for the day. Dylan Moore apparently getting some interest from the Boston Red Sox. This is something that came out from Chris Cotillo of Mass Live. He said that on social media on Monday afternoon. Dylan Moore getting some looks by the Red Sox. Look, it kind of makes sense for the Red Sox, right? Right now they lost Rob Refsnyder to the Mariners, so they need a guy who can hit lefties in theory. Demo can do that, at least when he's right. They could use a guy who's a versatile chess piece, outfield, infield, could play short, could play third, could play second, could even moonlight at first, can play all three outfield positions. So I understand why Dylan Moore would be drawing interest. I understand why he'd draw interest from a good team, right? Someone who doesn't have to overexpose him and can play him a more limited role. So I'm rooting for Demo to find success no matter what, but the Red Sox are a team that is reportedly interested. Speaking of Red Sox Mariners connections, Cooper Criswell, a guy who made, I think, 26 appearances for the Red Sox in 2024. The Mariners signed him, or traded for him, rather, the other day. Couple of interesting notes on Criswell. One, interesting arm slot, low arm slot. Has the ability to kind of trick you a little bit on the mound. But I'm kind of more interested in the logistics of it all. One, they traded for him. So the fact that they traded for him leads me to believe the Mariners are genuinely interested in him being a part of their organization. Two, Cooper Criswell is out of options. So if you really like him and he's out of options, maybe the Mariners think there's a legitimate place for him on the big league roster. Because if we get to spring training, come out of spring training, the Mariners can't just stash him in the minors. They have to DFA him, expose him to waivers, and risk losing him. So I would say that Cooper Criswell has a realistic chance of getting a very serious look to make this roster. Now, he can be a fifth starter should somebody get injured in spring training. Maybe he's a long guy in the bullpen. Maybe he's the long guy in the bullpen, the multi-inning guy in the bullpen, the mop-up guy in the bullpen, low leverage guy in the bullpen. But again, he has no options, so there isn't like a ton of flexibility with him. You can't just send him up and down. But I think Cooper Criswell, the fact that they traded for him and he's out of options, I think the Mariners have kind of a realistic maybe plan for him, at least a desire to get a real good look at him in 2026, at least in the spring. I continue to wonder what all this means for Emerson Hancock. In my perfect world, this is my perfect world, the Mariners have Dane Dunning as minor league depth. The Mariners have Logan Evans as minor league depth. And the Mariners are able to DFA Cooper Criswell and sneak him to the minors and let him be minor league depth. And then Emerson Hancock becomes a bullpen piece for this team. He does have options available. He is a guy that you can move up and down. We saw what the Mariners did last year with Casey Legumina and all these guys that they were shuttling up and down. Taylor Saucedo that they were shuttling up and down from Tacoma. Emerson Hancock has the ability to be that guy. Cooper Criswell does not. Cooper Criswell would be in the Casey Lawrence category where every time he comes up, he goes back down, he's got to get DFA'd. So Emerson Hancock, I think, in my perfect world, Dunning, Evans, Criswell, they're all in the minors as starter depth, and Hancock is kind of the eighth guy in the bullpen that can ride the Tacoma to Seattle shuttle. Now, I don't know that my ideal world is going to work out, because if the Mariners try to sneak Cooper Criswell through at the end of spring training, he could get claimed. You could lose him. And now all of a sudden you've got Dunning and Evans only, and maybe they want to keep Emerson Hancock in AAA as a starter rather than put him in the bullpen. I don't know. But the Mariners have now acquired multiple depth arms with starting experience. That, to me, initially signaled okay, they're gearing up to make Emerson Hancock a reliever now, and all of these other guys will be starter depth. But the fact that Criswell doesn't have any options leads me to wonder, maybe he is looked at as a bullpen candidate at the beginning of the year. But again, with no options, there's not a whole lot of flexibility there, right? You look at the Mariners bullpen, and I'll leave you on this. Andres Munoz, Matt Brash, Gabe Spire, Edward Bizardo, and Jose Ferrer, they're locked in. If they're healthy, they're on the squad, right? Carlos Vargas has no options either. So he can't be easily sent up and down. So you're rigid in keeping Carlos Vargas. Cooper Criswell has no options. You are rigid in keeping him. Casey Legumina and Jackson Kowar have no options. Somewhere in this bullpen, you're going to need an optionable chess piece up and down. Troy Taylor could be that guy. Emerson Hancock could be that guy. But somewhere that guy has to exist. Otherwise, you're just constantly risking losing guys. My goal is to have Emerson Hancock be the 8th piece in the bullpen. I don't know if they'll be able to swing it because I don't know how the Cooper Criswell situation is going to play out. But we've got 2 weeks until spring training, and we've got exactly 2 months from when I recorded this. 2 months from tonight is opening night. So we've got some time to figure this out. The Seahawks are in the Super Bowl. The Mariners are 2 months away from opening up at T-Mobile Park against Cleveland. I will be there that night, and I will be there in Peoria exactly 3 weeks from tonight. I cannot wait. We got a Super Bowl to win first. I want to thank and appreciate Maury Brown for coming on from Forbes. I want to thank all of you for listening live on YouTube or watching live on X. Those of you who will listen subsequently on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, I appreciate you. Taryn and I appreciate you for joining our free Mariners community and keeping the conversation going. Always join it again. It is free. Tell your friends it's marinersroundtable.com. We'll be back at it again on Thursday with Buster Olney, our ESPN MLB insider. But until then, and as always, go M's.